There's madness in boredom. Over 10 years ago, there was a 22-year-old Australian man named Christopher Lane who was living in Oklahoma to play college baseball. As he was jogging along what I imagine to be a sidewalk or a forest trail en route to see his girlfriend, he was fatally shot. One of the 3 teens held in the case told the authorities that they were, quote, bored and didn't have anything to do, so we decided to kill somebody, close quote. Whether the teens were really bored or not, it's not impossible to imagine that a group of bored teens would set out to kill someone because they had nothing better to do. Not every horrifying crime is premeditated. Sometimes people just do terrible things. There's madness in boredom. Boredom is generally defined as the state of being wary and restless through lack of interest. And while that's probably an accurate description, the consequences or fallout of boredom can swing any number of ways. Soren Kierkegaard, a 19th century Danish philosopher widely considered the father of existentialism, had a few things to say about boredom. In his work Either Or, Kierkegaard says, quote, people of experience maintain that it is very sensible to start from a principle. I grant them that, and start with the principle that all men are boring, close quote. Kierkegaard believed boredom to be a state in which one can never really escape. Boredom is not so much about what someone feels, as much as it is about what someone is. He goes on to say that, quote, boredom is a root of all evil, adding that it's strange that boredom, so still and static, should have such power to set things in motion. The effect that boredom exercises is altogether magical, except that it is not one of attraction, but of repulsion, close quote. Kierkegaard seems to suggest that boredom, whether by nature or as a sensation, is innate to the human experience. The wariness and restlessness we feel when we're bored is oftentimes the product of our minds scanning for an unavailable object of attention. In this way, Kierkegaard's notion of boredom has some similar stripes to that of Albert Camus' absurd philosophy, which is defined as our desire to search for meaning in a cosmos that appears cold and meaningless. And it's through this boredom, or absurdity, that many people experience serious bouts of depression. The majority of people generally navigate boredom in a somewhat harmless way. It's safe to say that the vast sum of those who experience boredom don't go out and murder someone. Eventually, the wariness and restlessness fall off like old skins, and we can move on with our lives until the sensation ultimately returns. And it does return. The 20th century German philosopher Martin Heidegger wrote a lot about the nature of boredom. For him, boredom was our coming face to face with stripped down existence. And it's when we've encountered naked existence that anxiety rises up within us, making us feel a little uneasy. According to Heidegger, one way we often deal with this anxiety-inducing encounter with existence is by clinging to things that distract us from it. The German philosopher once wrote, quote, we should not be at all surprised if the contemporary man in the streets feels disturbed or perhaps sometimes dazed and clutches all the more stubbornly at his idols when confronted with this challenge and with the effort required to approach this mystery, close quote. Heidegger's suspicion was that we don't want to encounter pure, unalloyed existence because it's strange and unknown and ultimately frightening. And we don't know what to do when we encounter something so profoundly unfamiliar. So we cling to what he calls our idols, or distractions. Heidegger was definitely onto something. Is it any wonder that a padded room in a mental institution is so often used as a form of punishment? In a white as snow room with nothing in it but insulated walls, there's nothing for a human being to do but be with their own thoughts. And whether we want to admit it or not, that's about as terrifying as being flung into outer space with no tethering cable. In a recent video, Mr. Beast, the most popular YouTube personality probably ever, spent 7 full days in solitary confinement, locked inside of a padded room. A physician who had apparently worked in a psych hospital for over 20 years was there to keep an eye on the situation. He went on to say that anyone who remained in a white room for longer than 50 hours could be at serious risk of permanent psychological damage. Fortunately, Mr. Beast didn't suffer any serious psychological damage during his time in confinement. But he would probably be among the first to tell us that it's painful, almost torturous, to be alone with our own thoughts for a prolonged period of time. The simple fact is that boredom is an element of being human. There's no escaping it, at least not for long. One possible workaround is maybe getting used to the idea of being with ourselves, of challenging ourselves to get out from under the idea that we always need to be entertained. This is where meditation comes in for many people. This is where it comes in for me. It's a deliberate attempt to induce silence and stasis for the purpose of our own psychological development. We have to understand that boredom is an important opportunity for us to reassess what's going on in our lives. It could be seen as a way of our mind attempting to reset itself, to get readjusted. The real rub, though, is that boredom tends to tighten its grip on us the harder we attempt to escape it. For any Harry Potter fans out there, boredom is kind of like Devil's Snare. It squeezes and clutches us the more we fight it. In other words, it gets better the less we fight it. There's definitely madness in boredom, but there's also value.